Hey everyone. I will talk today about DAOs mostly. I think blockchains don't touch it too much, and governance maybe even less. I mean, I have the slides depending on how many we are. We'll see if we do the game or we just do discussion in the end. So I brought a nice game with me, but I think if you're 5 people, it might not work out. But let's see. So DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. Before I go there, you know briefly who I am. I'm currently at the University of Zurich, a postdoc there. I did my PhD here at ETH in cryptoeconomics, looked on the design of these blockchain systems and the incentives and how people react to these incentives. And I'm also involved in 2 startups in this blockchain world. So yeah, so I think I have both views, like kind of this practitioner's view. We're trying to build DAOs, but I'm also researching them now in my position at University of Zurich. And I'm a big fan of them. So I'm trying to spread the gospel a little bit to you now. Okay, so let's start. Why DAOs? So without introducing them too much, why do we look into these decentralized autonomous organizations? I mean, one is like they're quite successful and they're like these community-powered success stories. So what do I mean? So we have like one project which is called MakerDAO. It's like a DAO, like one of these organizations which had at some point over $6 billion under management. So they're like a financial firm. They're taking care of something, of this huge pool of money. Then we have like Bankless DAO. This is like a DAO where you have like 2,500 active contributors. So like they're on a more or less daily basis. They're contributing to the project, which is like, I would say the size of at least a medium-sized company. So like even a large corporation. And then we have, for example, also Helium, another DAO, like one of these organizations which are deploying real-world physical devices. So all these dots on the map, it's like a hotspot, a LoRaWAN hotspot, people placed in their homes. And they're using a DAO to manage this network. So basically DAOs, they have like real-world impact. They organize a lot of people and yeah, they capture some value. It's like kind of the very brief motivation why it could make sense to look into them. But before I will tell you what DAOs actually are, I will take a very huge step back and I will look into some theory, but I hope to like that it will be illustrative. So I'm looking from complexity science, basically complex systems. My professor at ETH, he was like a physicist and he has like this view of the world of like these interconnected dots and out of this worldview, there are like some mechanisms of how you can manage these systems. But before we look into this, what is complexity? So like we know that in our world at the moment, we have a lot of challenges. I could also have put maybe a war picture here nowadays. So like, but all of them, like I would say, they're interconnected with each other. And the question is really who can take a decision? So which of these issues should we solve first? Yeah, like is it like pollution? Is it garbage? Is it war? And then if we know like who can take this decision, then the question is like, how do we decide? So once we identified something we want to do, so how do we actually implement it? And then, yeah, like basically how it should be implemented. So like I will go into these 3 questions very quickly. But when we look into these traditional approaches, so who in the past actually knew what can be done? Yeah, so who can make a decision? It was very often, at least in Europe, the church. Yeah, so the church kind of was like this organization, and they had like some holy knowledge, and they knew exactly what is right and wrong. So, for example, whom you can love and whom you can't love. So they knew this. Nowadays we have the state, and the state can tell you this is good and this is bad. Yeah, so like you can take this type of drug is okay, and this type of drug is like kind of bad. So the state is able to define this, and this like slowly merging into this corporate world where like now like corporations take the decisions for us. So for example, what you can speak or what you can't speak in the internet is decided by corporations. So like all of these things, what they have like in common is that the centralized entity basically is taking the decision. So how are these organizations deciding? So some of them use more like democratic aspects, others are more like a monarchy maybe in some sense, and others maybe even going to anarchy, depending in which community, maybe online you're looking. But very often, at least in traditional world, these things are happening offline. And then when it comes about like implementing decisions, we have very often these hierarchical organizations, like these structures, where we take a decision on the top, and then through a chain of command, we're implementing them on the ground. So like hierarchical organizations, all of them have some challenges. If we just look into hierarchical organizations, one aspect is, for example, that feedback and information flows are not very well manifested in this organization. So usually those on the ground, they sense the environment, but until the information is traveling to the top, you have a lot of biases inside. Power structures, power imbalances, for example, but also very often you have not so good lateral flow in these organizations. So there are some disadvantages. And what does it mean? Oh, it's the wrong slide. I need to show it later. But so how does it manifest? So one example, example from Germany. So I already told Gonzalo I'm partly German. And what we had in Germany, the state decided we need to reduce CO2, like so we need to save the world, and which is like kind of an honorable intention, I would say. And what they did, they used once like top-down subsidies, and on the other hand, top-down regulations. They basically said, look, let's subsidize biogas. Yeah, so we basically encourage the planting of these biocrops through subsidies. And on the other hand, we had top-down regulation. When you go to the petrol station in Germany, you have like a specific type of petrol, which you, basically these petrol stations have to sell, which indirectly also encourages the planting of these biocrops for production, which was like an honorable intent, but we had this side effect. Yeah, so the side effect was that now in Germany, everyone is growing this one type of crop or two types of crops to produce these things, which in the end endangers biodiversity, soil fertility, and all of these things. So this is kind of a side effect. Yeah, we had the intended effect, reducing CO2. Now we have a side effect. And then we have like a cascading effect, cascading failure, because like Germany also has a lot of animals and they need to eat. And the food production, because like no longer this food is produced in Germany, we outsource it to the Amazon, where basically now the rainforest is cut down, and where now these animal feeds are planted. So kind of we have like a cascading failure in the system. And one could argue that this gives us now a negative feedback loop. Yeah. So like, and the question is now really, why is this happening like this? So like we want to save the world, but in the end, we are not able to do so. And the answer is actually that we are living in these complex systems. Yeah. And our world actually gets more and more complex every day. So what does it mean, complex system? So first you can symbolize it as this network of networks. Yeah. So, and in this network of networks, not the single node is actually the important thing. Like these networks are characterized more through the interconnection, through the relationships between these nodes. They characterize the whole system, basically. So and basically through this, you have like all of these effects, which I illustrated. So for example, maybe you have heard of the butterfly effect, like I think there was a famous movie also from it. So basically the wing of like a butterfly can fly on the one side of the world. On the other hand, you have a tornado through these basically connections. And this is like kind of the message when you look from a complex system perspective on the world, is that you cannot really steer it like a coffee machine or build it like a car. Yeah, so you cannot really have the full overview and then you know exactly I steer this screw here and then this will happen. So this is like very difficult, and you can make a theoretical argument that it's impossible. And the implication from this is actually that a centralized node cannot know what should be done. And even if it would know, could not know how to implement it. That's like kind of the message. If you come from here, and this looks now very devastating. So like, and now also complexity science, they give us some solutions. So who can actually know what should be done? And there's these very, basically first time this effect, like collective intelligence or also wisdom of crowds, was illustrated by Golden in 1907. So what he did, he went to an animal fair. Yeah, so in England, there was an animal fair, and they were selling cows there. And there was one cow which people actually could win by guessing the correct weight of these cows. So like all these people who went to this fair, they were guessing the weight of the cow, and the winner basically got this cow. And what he noticed actually, that most people in this crowd, they were like far off from the real weight of the cow. But when he took the median of all the guesses, it was up to some percentile, like basically up to some dots after the comma, the exact weight of the cow. So like here, 2,000 guesses of this. There's a very nice BBC video. I mean, if we have time, we'll watch it later. Just 5 minutes. It's a repeatable experiment you can do, which is like fascinating. I play it like at children birthday parties. I play it sometimes with bigger groups in the classroom. So like, and really, it's a nice thing to do. So basically, the idea here is like kind of the knowledge does not lie in an individual, but like kind of us collectively together, we can guess the right weight of the cow. Okay, this is like kind of a simple example. Can we bring it to the next level? And they're like experiments, like maybe some of you like into literature when you go, it's like prediction markets. It's like kind of a word here, but there was also this experiment by the CIA where they basically took 3,000 ordinary citizens to predict world events. And basically they were as good as the CIA analysts who had like access to secret information. So you can play around with the fact there's some research going into this direction. And from a theoretic point of view, what you actually need in order for this collective intelligence that it manifests is like you need to have free access to information. So information should be basically the crowd should have like an unbiased view of the state in an ideal sense. Then some privacy and independence to reason about it. So there should not be a nudging or manipulation or something. That people should be able to reason about it and then express their ideas, their opinions, their views. And basically, if this is like perfectly manifested, then you can get this collective intelligence. And funny thing is like that I mean, when you go to literature, it's also obvious, but can back it up. It's like the different democracies in Western world, they focus on different of these aspects. So you have like the Nordic countries, which are like they have this right to information. So like this free access to information enshrined very deeply in their legislation. Like in Switzerland, for example, also Germany, like we have like this privacy aspect, Austria, for example. So really people want to stay private. And then you have the US where everything is basically about freedom of expression. And one can say that these different societies kind of developed some aspect of this collective intelligence to express itself, which comes to the next spot. So now basically we know, like we have these crowds and we can identify some options which are out there, but how to channel them into actual decisions. And for this, you can take basically democracy, but bring it to the next level. So there's a lot of research done in this direction, like digital democracy, which actually makes, tries to manifest these previous collective intelligence into actually good decisions. We'll not go here too deeply into, but in order to, from a theoretical point of view, to have good decisions is actually you use this collective intelligence. Then you have like a deliberation process where you work out options and then in the end you vote on them. And there are some examples, not blockchain related one, for example, for deliberation, like Taiwan is like kind of quite advanced in the forefront. So they have also minister for digitalization and like these things. And they have this really cool tool where the whole population can input their opinions and they can actually impact legislation in Taiwan, which is, it's, I mean, if you have not heard of it, check it out. It's a cool thing. And then when it comes to voting, there are also updates to basically democracy, as we know, different types of voting. So for example, you have quadratic voting, where you basically say people have different amount of vote power. For example, each of us has like 9 votes to give away, and there's 3 options. And if you put all your votes into one option, basically you take the square root out of it. So your vote power is only 3. But by splitting your vote and you put 3, 3, 3 into each, basically you can increase your power, which can result maybe in more fair outcomes. So people play around with quadratic voting and liquid democracy, for example. So these are all things which are happening here. And then how should it be actually implemented? And this is like my favorite part. It's basically through adaptation. So we have these flocks of birds and other things in nature which are actually self-organizing. So what does it mean? So like you have this flock of birds, and the interesting thing of these birds is actually that no one is actually forcing these birds or controlling these birds. So like all these birds are more or less voluntarily part of this flock, and it basically moves through space through a very simple mechanism. If I'm too far away from a bird, I fly back, and if I'm too close to a bird, I fly in the opposite direction, basically. And through this, you have this flock, which has very beneficial properties. They can protect much easier against predators. They find very well food resources. And the nice thing is it's very resilient. So you cannot really kill like the leading birds and everything bursts because this bird does not exist. Yeah, it's like this very resilient, adaptable structure. Yeah. And also our human body, you can say, is like this adaptable self-organizing system, and many things in nature actually self-organizing. And the question is now, can we also use these in technical setups, like, and not just in nature? And it's like for my former professor, did very nice experiment. So usually, hey, when you have like traffic light control systems in cities, how it works, usually you have a centralized authority, like the planning office or something like this, and they decide how the traffic flow should happen through the city. So they say we have morning traffic, we have after a football match traffic, we have like weekend traffic, and then they basically try to organize all the traffic lights that you have green waves or something like this. And this is like done in top-down manner. And what they did here is like in simulations, but also in experiments. So like in the city of Dresden, it is implemented, and also some cities in Switzerland, for example, where they build this self-organizing traffic light system. So you have like traffic lights, and the traffic light can decide on its own how to switch the lights, and it only communicates with the neighboring traffic lights. There's no one has a full overview of the whole system, so you never know really in which state it is. It's all local, and through feedback mechanisms, basically the traffic flow is steered, and you can show that for all traffic participants, it's much more efficient in the end. And it's like kind of based on this adaptation, self-organization of the system. So you basically have this mechanism. So you need to have this autonomy to act of the individual. So kind of you need to be able to make a movement. This movement gives a change in the environment, and then you need to be able to adapt your behavior. So basically, it's all about feedback and ideally real-time feedback. Okay. This was a very high-level introduction of some theory, and this is like a different view now on DAOs, basically, comes from this perspective, is actually that DAOs are the natural structure to manifest these mechanisms. So you have this collective intelligence, so you have like this world community, which are organized in these DAOs. Then you have usually some voting inside, some decision-making, and then some implementation again by the community. And I would argue if you do it right, then DAOs are actually the structure to manifest these mechanisms to, in the end, result in better outcomes. So this was now sort of theater. Basically, I don't know like how much DAOs you would listen to how many presentations. So, but now the question is, what is actually a DAO? Let's go into it. You can also, I mean, if you want like to test it, like if you have a question, just ask. I mean, you can be interactive. So, but like one view on these DAOs, from my slide, I took it from someone else, but like you have on the one hand, like these traditional organizations, like centralized decision-making, top-down execution of decisions, often, yeah, very hierarchical, usually closed. It's not so easy to enter these organizations. It's opaque, and yeah, very centralized. And DAOs are like kind of this shift to the other side. So having more flat structures, more open, very easy to enter, very easy to go out, more transparent, basically decentralized. It's like one view on them. That's basically just what I have said. Okay. Another view on DAOs is like, it's like this, we call it like this yin and yang of community and organization. So it's again, because like in the end, you have, it's, I don't know like how much you have looked into them, but it's all about the community. So you're trying kind of to motivate the community to join this organization. And this community usually consists of individuals. They have relationships with each other, which is informal. They have own goals and very personal goals, which also not necessarily aligned with the organization. And on the other hand, you have an organization which is in the end a collaboration of individuals to implement a shared vision. And here's like, I don't know, like I think maybe I don't know, like, but there was like Daniel Spina like 2 weeks ago at the University of Zurich, like speaking. He's like kind of, I would say, a forward thinker in the DAO space. And he has this quote here, which I like a lot. And basically, a sense of community brings this trust and well-being, which enable better organization, and effective organization can enable value flows that sustain community. And then you can build these highly like anti-fragile organizations which adapt, which like stick really together, like have like this community spirit. Yeah, it's like if you do it right, but you need to balance it because like too much organization can get very rigid, which kind of kills community, and then people just leave and they don't find it fun anymore or whatever. And if you have too much community, then basically it's very unstructured. You don't really have impact. Yeah, so you cannot really manifest things. So like in the end, it needs to be balanced, and DAOs are like this, yeah, this balance between community and organization. When you come or you try to define them, so like I mean, they emerge now in the context of blockchain. These term DAOs like kind of emerge. There's not a real definition what a DAO actually is. So like in a very narrow sense, some people say it needs to be smart contract based. So like a DAO needs to be governed by code which is written to the blockchain. And some people extend it a little bit. So they say smart contracts are actually not needed. They can only be blockchain based. Yeah, so for example, Bitcoin does not have smart contracts, but there are like quite a few people saying that Bitcoin is actually the best DAO we have. Like and so it's kind of needs to have this blockchain element. Other people go even further away. They say it needs to be code based, maybe not even a blockchain, and then can take a very broader sense and say, yeah, something else. And one definition which like we started to use is like a DAO is like kind of decentralized, characterized by this broad community in peers. It's autonomous, so like enabling the permissionless action of community members, that like they can enter, go out, and it's organized, yeah, having like mechanisms for coordination and decision making, and that's yeah, basically 3 mechanisms which we saw before, like kind of a small framework we're currently working at. So like on the community end, like if you have a well-functioning community, you can like harness this collective intelligence, so like accessing this pool of knowledge which is there and to identify good solution strategies, good options. And then you use some mechanisms to channel this into decisions for the organization. So it's more like on the organizational side of DAOs. And then when you have decisions, you again use the autonomy of the participating actors to implement it. And then you have like kind of this interaction. Yep. Okay. I mean, yeah. So we developed on top of this like as I said, this framework, and we also analyzed a very interesting DAO which is out there, like the MetaDAO. And I can talk later maybe a bit about them if you're interested. But basically we looked in these several dimensions and we assessed them, how well they're doing it. And basically we said, look, your deliberation mechanisms are not too nice. Like it's really not functioning something in your DAO. And then just a month after, we said basically MetaDAO was really cool. They were totally decentralized. It was like a very cyberpunk thing, like so to say. But then they made the full U-turn and they said, now we have like a centralized authority and they take all decisions for the next 5 months and somehow and we kind of predicted it a little bit. So we're a little bit proud of our view here. It's like I like to show this, but okay. Yeah, I mean, this is like now some examples from practice that you maybe get to touch how this looks like at the moment very often. As I said, like DAOs instantiate these 3 mechanisms if done right, and how do they do it? So on the one hand, yeah, you have all these social media platforms where these communities, they meet and talk, and they can very often you have like different places for the same community. It's not so decisive where people actually discuss. So like, for example, in the Bitcoin case, there's not the official platform where people talk with each other. There are many unofficial ones, and you have conferences, so it can also be offline. I mean, I just put your online source, but different conferences where people meet and yeah, like discuss. And very often you don't have to show your identity. So it's like all like, at least when it's online, it's very anonymous. But I also went to conferences where people are like running around with their, I don't know, they hide their faces. So like some people are very privacy aware. So yeah, so basically you have the possibility to stay private and not to reveal yourself or decide your own identity, what you want to show in which context. And in the end, yeah, we all know, I think, like you can basically say what you want very often in these channels. So you have this freedom of expression. And that's at the moment how DAOs actually, yeah, I would say not very consciously, but implicitly they have this collective intelligence aspect is very deeply enshrined in them. Then they use digital democracy. I mean, I have slides later on Bitcoin. I think we'll not make it, but I can maybe talk here a little bit. Maybe I will explain you how Bitcoin takes decisions, like to just give you an understanding, like because like Bitcoin is very decentralized. So, but Bitcoin, like, do you know GitHub? Like, yeah, I think you all have heard of GitHub. So it's like kind of a central repository, which is there. And the whole governance of Bitcoin goes around these repository. So like you have like there, you have improvement proposals, Bitcoin improvement proposals, which are like a Word document, like just a document which has to have some structure, introduction, some context and like this. So like there's a structure, and then you can write an improvement proposal and say what you would like to improve within Bitcoin. And then you can push this, make a pull request, and you add this to the repo. Then it's written there. Then it goes through a very, yeah, it's not a very sophisticated process. So basically, you make a draft, make it basically on your own PC, basically. Then you try to make a pull request. I will tell you in a second who decides it, but it's basically in a way that they only check the formal requirements. The formal requirements need to be checked, but not the content of your improvement proposal. Then it becomes basically proposed. It's on GitHub then. Everyone can see it. It's just a document there. And then discussions happen around it. And there's no, yeah, basically, like, yeah, so basically it's up there. And then you start to make, you advertise it. You go to conferences and you say, look, I have a genius idea. I want to change something in Bitcoin. You talk with people. Then there's maybe a mailing list and you announce your idea on the mailing list. And then you go into discussions and you try to kind of build support for your idea. And then the voting in Bitcoin, how it actually happens is, and now I don't know if I'm taking too many steps now, but have you talked about miners in Bitcoin? You know how mining works in Bitcoin, like these things? No. Not really, yeah. Yeah. I mean, so in Bitcoin, basically you have like computers and they talk with each other and they do mining. They basically they need to solve a puzzle, so to say. And the one who solves the puzzle the quickest, he's the winner. Yeah. And they do it in a way that all those who contribute to the network, they kind of align and you can basically decide what is correct and what is wrong. Okay, so like it's a very simple illustration, and basically how you win is basically by producing a new block in this blockchain. So you say, I found a puzzle. This is a puzzle we were all looking for. And everyone looks at the puzzle, says, yes, it's a puzzle. And then they continue working on the next puzzle. And basically basically the core idea is here, the more computing power you have, the more voting power you have. Yes, like if you have one computer, I have one vote. If I have 10,000 computers, I have 10,000 votes. That's like kind of the idea. And basically, the one with the most votes has the highest chance to propose new blocks. But anyone has basically the chance to propose one. It's all probabilistic. So now how voting actually happens is actually you have all these different people. I mean, there's some problems with the Bitcoin mining network, but let's say there are at least 6 bigger parties and thousands smaller ones in this network. And then what they do is they propose, like whenever they find a new block, there's a field in this block where they can actually reference these proposals on GitHub. And then they basically switch the bit which is connected to the proposal to 1 if they're in favor, or 0 if they're not in favor. Yeah. And basically but this is just signaling. This is not a vote. Yeah. So like it's just signaling. Basically, you have all these people who actually actively contribute to the network, and they just make the finger up and down. And then there's an informal rule that when it's like kind of 80%, you accept it maybe. And then what happens actually, because like in Bitcoin, the only thing which is governed is the actual protocol, like the code which is running. Yeah. So basically, and then what actually happens is that if it's accepted, you update your computer with new code. But this is not a top-down process. Yeah. So like you can basically say, I update my code, and the other one's not updating his code. Now we have 2 different codes running. And then there are instances where these codes, they work together and everything is fine. You can have an old version, but sometimes they're incompatible to each other. And then you have basically a split in the network. And you have 2 networks. Like one is following the old rules and the other part is following the new rules. And then and this happened in Bitcoin history, like 4 or 5 times already, that you have like a split in Bitcoin. So you have Bitcoin Cash, for example, you've heard. You have Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, the different Bitcoin networks out there, which at some point said, we do our own community. And then like basically 10% of the community went away and they did their own thing. Then you have 2 networks. It's like kind of this permissionless nature. No one is forced to be part of it. They can just go away or they can just come back. And sometimes they come back. And yeah, it's like what I try to explain here is like what Bitcoin has. They have like in this terminology, which we have there, like they have a very good collective intelligence because anyone can just join, talk, and as they like. So you have a lot of discussions in the Bitcoin community. They have a somehow okay deliberation mechanism, which is very rudimentary when you compare to what states have or what also, yeah, like Taiwan, for example, is doing, like with their digital democracy. It's like it's very rudimentary. But they have a very particular type of voting, which is like sometimes we call like voting by hash power, like basically by economic hash power, economic investment. And then the implementation is again, like Bitcoin is like the par excellence, like for a permissionless network. So anyone can say they're part of Bitcoin because like there's no one telling you if you're part or not. There's no government or someone giving you an identity card or like a human resource department who needs to give you a contract or something like this. And this was, I think, was in the beginning the power of Bitcoin. So some people just said, I like Bitcoin and I'm Bitcoin. And then they went to the local newspaper and said, look, you need to report about Bitcoin. And then you have like all these evangelists and people like really driven by it. And yeah, so, okay, but yeah, so the liberation is there. Then you have like other DAOs, like I talked in the beginning briefly about MakerDAO. These DAO which like has this money basically which they're managing, and they have like a much more elaborated voting system. You can vote on chain, like yeah, that's yeah. So like they use so DAOs use these digital democracy basically to take decisions. That's like how they do it, and adaptation. So this is like from one of my startups. Like it's like just an anecdote, but I was very happy when I saw this. Like so we had like this fringe small thing. So we were in a Discord channel doing our stuff, and then at some point, the Cabo Fox came around and he said, "Hey guys, since I'm interested in the project, for those interested, I created an Italian group for onocoy." So he just created a Telegram group, and this was already like a month old. There were like 30 people from Italy talking about onocoy, and they blocked our devices and like these things. Like, and he just said, "Look, we are here, and anyone who wants is welcome." So, like, I mean, in traditional company sense, I mean, it would be so strange. You would say, no, look, we're not associated with them. You know, like we have like our formal channel of communication. We have like a PR department, I don't know, like, and so not, he used our logo in Telegram and he basically said he's onocoy. I mean, so it's so basically this is like kind of this autonomous action of community members, like they just do things in Web3 and they self-organize in a sense. Another way, which is like more formal, I think, which also made, I think all these DAOs and Web3 in general very successful. They have this feedback of the token on several, and this was also my research in my PhD basically. You have like this feedback of tokens on different levels. The easiest one is like for a project, it's like the stock, yeah. So like Bitcoin knows it does well when the price goes up. Kind of feedback to the community, something going well, and if it goes down, yeah, it's like a kind of a very high level feedback mechanism. But you can also make it much more granular, and in this sense, very powerful. So like in some what we do in onocoy, it's a little bit like with Helium, where you saw all these dots on the network. Like we are incentivizing people to place physical hardware. So like we tell them, look, you get some tokens from us, and you place this thing on your roof. Yeah, and then these tokens will have some value, blah blah blah. So like this. So and they get this thing now on the roof, and we have like 2,000 of them, and they're doing this. And the interesting thing is like it's like kind of they get varying amount of tokens, varying amount. Yeah, so like if they have a very good placement of this thing on the roof, then they get more tokens. And if they do mistakes, for example, if there's a tree next to it or something like this, or there's some problems, then they get less tokens. But they just get it. So we have some documentation, but no one ever reads the documentation. Yeah, so like we have these community members, they just come, they are cool, they place it, and then they wait 2 days and they see, I just get 1 token. And I know my friend gets 6. And then they come to Discord. Hey, why I'm just getting 1 token? And they complain. Yeah, so like, and then it's not us telling them, and there's someone in the community, a couple of telling them, do you have a tree next to your place, blah, blah, and then people start talking, and it's like a really low-level feedback mechanism, and we're not doing much. It's like kind of a learning inside of the community through a very simple token mechanism, and it scales quite well without us having to make manual tutorials all the time with people or something like this. Yeah, it's like adaptation, and this is like, yeah, how this works.
Sorry, might I ask?
Yes.
What is the point of this thing you do?
We are like for this startup, we are trying to improve GPS. Like in GPS, basically it's only accurate up to 5 meters, something like this. And the biggest problem here is like that you have the atmosphere. So like you see the signal, like the satellites, but you have weather and thunderstorm and blah, blah. You get the signal and there's like some error term inside of it, which and basically we incentivize people to place an antenna on the roof, basically, and use the technology, which is called RTK. It's an established technology, which was there since 20 years. But basically what it does is it gets the same signals, but the antenna knows exactly where it is, knows the exact position on the Earth, and can calculate what is the error term, like the correction, basically. And then it can share this correction with neighboring devices, basically. And you need to have this antenna every 15 to 20 kilometers. And then you can basically improve GPS up to a sub-centimeter level. Not just GPS, like also the others like Galileo and Baidu, and which are there. And yeah, that's it. Yeah. And there are like a lot of these projects now, like it's called DePIN. So you have Helium for LoRaWAN, but they're like yeah, you have energy grids companies now, like in Web3, like trying to incentivize people to share information around like these things. And they often work with tokens. And I mean, the argumentation from a theoretical point of view for DAOs here is like twofold. So one, like you have like usually a huge capital investment cost. Like, so for example, onocoy, like this idea is around since years. Like my co-founder, he tried to do this before as an industry collaboration, basically among major players. The problem is like you need like around 80 to 100 million to build this global network, like as an investment cost. And in many regions, you don't have a demand at the moment for this service. Some regions you have, and others not. And so no one is really investing into it. It's kind of this chicken egg problem. So one is the capital investment, and basically we're not buying these antennas. So people pay $500, they buy this antenna, and then they get our tokens. So it's like kind of the idea. So we're spreading the investment cost. And the other thing is like the operational cost is also much, much lower, because like usually as a centralized company, you would need to own these properties in different countries, maybe. And you need to have someone going out to maintain these stations. So after 1 or 2 years, they get some dirt, and maybe you need to clean it, like these things. And to steer this is like, yeah, at some point you reach kind of a sailing where it doesn't scale. Or at least we have not observed it. So like 20 companies, they're offering this service, but usually very restricted to a local area. So like, and that's the argumentation why a DAO, like kind of, you can, from operational point of view, reduce the costs a lot, yeah, by having community members doing it. Yes. Tokens, okay. Okay, so this is like the shiny world. So, but DAOs also have problems. Maybe that's like last slide, and then we can discuss what we do next afterwards. Because I have this game, but I think, yeah, it doesn't really make sense. But maybe we still do a guessing game, and I give out some tokens. But first, let's talk about DAO challenges. So like, I mean, maybe it's too deep already, but I really like to show the slides because like maybe you have this intrinsic feeling also it's like kind of like anarchy and it will never work or something like this. So and there's like this image this went around like a year ago also in the DAO space, and people got really, I mean, this illustrates like the problems of some DAOs or many DAOs, I would say at the moment. So like basically you have a guy, he says, look guys, we have a hole in our boat, we get water, we have a problem. Yeah, and then you have like people saying, technical, it's not a hole, it's a special port. Yeah, so like let's first define maybe the problem before we actually address it. And someone has a totally different point of view of the whole situation. Yeah, so maybe someone likes, so I'm so proud of our boat, I like it. With that hole even better. Yeah, so like you have someone who really doesn't want to change anything, needs to be like this, and then someone's questioning his authority. Are you an expert in shipbuilding? Do you actually know that this is a hole? So like, and kind of you have like these yeah, kind of these so on. I mean, there are also other problems around DAOs, but it's like kind of this madness of the crowds, maybe some people call it. And I would say the problem here in these pictures, like that's if you get like these mechanisms wrong, then you kind of get problems. Like one could argue that in this situation here, you don't really need collective intelligence. Yeah, so because this what's illustrated here is like collective intelligence. And I think if we have like time and we need to build our vision or like make a strategic next step where to invest or something like this, then such a discussion facilitated well is probably very helpful like this. But if we have a problem, like this flock of birds and the predators coming or something like this, then like letting all the birds talk does not make too much sense. So like the argument here would be like from this framework which we have is like actually this DAO he needs to work on the adaptation actually. So like collective intelligence not a problem. All of them are quite engaged. Like the things like adaptation. So like we have this guy, he knows it's a problem, and from organizational point of view, we need to equip this person with the tools to react. Yeah, so like when this person can react and fix the hole, then we still can decide afterwards if it was a good that he fixed it or not. Like this permissionless nature, so like the actor needs to be empowered, needs to have the autonomy to actually just decide and react to local feedback. That's like the view here. So like the problem is not, and then basically what is now happening in research, like what most people are doing, is actually, oh, DAOs are not working. We need to improve our decision-making processes. So now, like most people, when they do research or papers which are currently written, are about different types of voting, different types of deliberation mechanisms. But I personally would argue here the problem is not the decision making. They could even vote here, but it would still take time. And so it's not the problem is not the voting aspect, it's actually the adaptation. And yeah. And I would say, I mean, if you want to do research, then research into adaptation.